Good afternoon on what is a mild, grey and overcast day. I'm in the reading nook with a nice hot cup of tea. A cat who is not ours. And a parcel to unbox. So let's get this open. So I've got the knife. Get this well away from his curious nose. Go. Almost open. And because he's still watching me. And if I open this up, what I've got in here is that. Okay, so this is Against the Slave Lords, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons campaign. And if you open up, I've already here's the blurb that came with it. So this was published in 2013 by Wizards of the Coast. So 4 classic adventures plus 1, originally designed for the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Open Tournament at Gen Con 8, the Slave Lords adventures became instant classics, which broke the mold by delivering thrilling stories as well as challenging encounters. The Slave Lords themselves proved a worthy and memorable threat. Never before had the D&D game enjoyed such a rogues gallery of endearing and enduring villains. Against the Slave Lords collects the 4 Slave Lords adventure modules into one limited edition premium hardcover hardback book, which of course is this, and preserving the material layout and timeless black and white interior art. This collection also includes a brand new full-length AD&D prequel adventure, A0 Danger at Dark Shelf Quarry, by Skip Williams, which introduces the threat of the Slave Lords in a new and exciting way. And it says playable with D&D Next rules found at dndnext.com. Now, a couple of things there. First off, D&D Next, dndnext.com was essentially the playtest rules for the iteration of what became Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This is back in 2013, really before the 40th anniversary of Dungeons & Dragons 2014. And A0. Here we've got the image of A0. And this is the only image of the. Did a review of this one when it came out, and this is the only appearance of that cover. It almost doesn't appear anywhere else online, which is a little bit odd. But anyway, so let's have a look inside. Now, at the time, so 2013, Wizards of the Coast did a number of these books. They did. There is also S1 to 4, which is basically a reprint of the special series adventures, like S1 Tomb of Horrors. S2 White Plume Mountain, S3 Expedition to Barrier Peaks, S4 Lost Dungeon of Sloshkanth, I believe, which I've also got. I'll probably do an unboxing of that. I might actually get around to reviewing that one because I never actually have, but this one I have reviewed, and I have a look at the Slavers adventure before. So open up. So nice and stiff board back book there, and then frontispiece, and we've got a forward, and this is we actually got several forwards, actually multiple forwards. We have forwards for A0 from Skip Williams, and then David Zeb Cook for A1 Against the Slave Lords, A2 that's Harold Johnson, so that's so A1 Slave Pits of the Undercity, A2 Secrets of the Slavers Stockade, A3 Assault on the Area of the Slave Lords, and A4 Dungeons of the Slave Lords. So Alan Hammock forward for A3, and then Lawrence Schick for forward to A4. And in the Dungeons of the Slave Lords is probably one of the very first Advanced Dungeons and Dragons modules that I bought. I've still got a copy. It's in nice condition, brilliantly pink cover. A semi-naked adventurous depiction on the front. So we get into, very quickly, we start off with Dungeons module A0, Danger at Dark Shelf Quarry, adventure for character levels 1 to 3. Because the adventures for this campaign really is sort of like a sort of mid-range, or upper mid-range. So you're talking a 7th level through to about 12th or so, something like that. And the idea was that you would run this campaign in between T1 to 4 Temple of Elemental Evil, and then afterwards you would play through G1 to 3 against the Giants, and then D1 against the Drow, and finally Q1 Lolth as one long giant campaign. So you've got the adventure background for A0, Danger at Dark Shelf Quarry, and the layout is they have got this right. In 2013, they were still able to produce a book which felt and looked like a advanced Dungeons and Dragons scenario. So yeah, I mean, basically you've got quite a lot of walls of text here. So click through. We've got an illustration there, past the cat's tail. So Goblin Overseers, of course, and what you find in the quarry down below. So more of the Overseers, and some of the denizens at the other sort of like are part of it, and those are troglodytes. And we get to concluding the adventure. And introducing against the slave lords there, a monster there, the mud tiger, and the key to the map. So you've got a map of the quarry and the fortifications, and then basically the upper level, the guardhouse, and the lower level, and then down to the quarry level itself. So it's quite a lot to it for a mini dungeon. There's quite a lot of adventure there, exploring, and then we get into the first adventure. Which is Dungeon Slave Pits, the Undercity, and I was incorrect about the levels. So this is levels 4 to 7. So yes, very mid-range. So we've got a background and a start. I'm talking about the tournament level because obviously these scenarios will run as tournament stages, so quite detailed. And you've got illustrations there of sort of like what can be seen there. The infamous point where you have to cross a room on this plank. And this level, basically, if the floor's collapsed, there'll be a whole load of rubbish. Encountering some orcs there, and then including in the guardhouse and encountering them in the corridor. And then we come to the slave pits, where literally the guards are used to walking along the tops of the bars, and you come down to the end, and you've got storeroom. You've got monsters introduced like the Aspis, giant Sundew, and then the tournament characters as well, and with all their weapons, magical items, and so on, reflecting their level. Tournament scoring, because you could play this as a tournament scenario if you wanted to now. There's the tournament map, so there's quite a bit of difference between this map, because in general the tournament maps are very linear, so you then just sort of there, make your way through back down to there. And underneath you've got the tournament dungeon map, and then you've got the full map of the fort, and you can explore all of it. I mean, there's not very much in the middle there, as you can see, mostly rubbish. And then the same again for the dungeon, depending on how you want to run it. And the campaign's going to be very much like this. You'll have done tournament maps and then full maps. And then we've got Secret of the Slave of Stockade, Harold Johnston and Tom Mulvey, the second part. And there really isn't sort of it's all really nicely, cleanly presented, as you can see. Quite a wall of text, but the information all there all necessarily to get you running these adventures. And it's interesting to note that this is not a campaign that Wizards of the Coast has really revisited since really reprinting this book. There was a sequel, Slavers, written by Chris Pramas and Sean Reynolds, I believe, back from 1999, one of the last few books that TSR published. And then, apart from a book from Kenza and Co. for Hackmaster, Smackdown Against the Slavers, there isn't anything else that I'm aware of. Now, I could be wrong, and it's an interesting thing that I want to pursue. You know, you basically go through the whole sort of like thematic line, the iterations of these modules, because you know, players and writers and game masters do take inspirations from them and revisit them. So again, quite a lot of artwork, quite a lot of you know, text without any artwork in here. Get down to the dungeon level, and you know, you're just looking at bulk plain text for the most part. Bit of illustration there. And then you get the section nearly at the end for this one, so I can show you the maps. So introduce things like the Phantom, the Boggle, Cloaker, and the Haunt as new monsters. Then you've got notes on the tournament characters again, because hey, you can still all use all of this. Okay, and these essentially versions of the same characters again, but instead, you know, what we've got here is the Slaver Stockade, which the player character is going to assault, and you've got the dungeon there, and essentially the grey areas are the tournament areas. You know, otherwise the player characters don't have to bother about the non tournament areas, and you've got a bigger focus on excerpts from the dungeon at the end. And then by Alan Hammock is the author, Assault on the Eyrie of the Slave Lords. And pretty much it's the same again. We'll see if I can find any more artwork. And this one is, you know, this is where you actually find your way into to the hidden city of Sudaham, which is part of the semi-final round for the tournament. And in general play, you've got the entrance, and you are going to go into the base for the slave lords themselves and explore the city. So you've got a complete mini city described in some detail. You've got a bit more freedom of movement here. You know, it is a dark and dreadful place, and then you access the catacombs below to proceed and find out, essentially, make that your further move upon the slave lords, in case you're encountering there, fighting there. You know, including things like, you know, the cunning gelatinous cubes, the Grotto of Terror, the Shambling Mound, are all encounters below in the catacombs. And then here we've actually got the slave lords themselves. Here they appear. Full stats for them, but no real illustrations. And you've got a full recommendation of what, you know, slave lord actions from round to round. What happens if the players win? What happens if the players lose? And then the monsters we have got this Stroper, just a single Stroper, tournament scoring again, and rules for things like tournament melee, missile fire into melee, tournament characters, and Captain's Not Ours has come back. Got bored, wanted a lap. So yeah, here are the tournament characters. And then we've got the cave maps, sewer maps to get into Sudaham, and of course technical situations examined in more detail, so you can set those up. And then maps of players entering into Sudaham for further exploration. And essentially what happens is that ultimately, you also got the Isle of the Slave Lords. This is more important, essentially, for the fourth part, for Lawrence Schick's adventure in the Dungeons of the Slave Lords. And infamously, this is probably the most infamous starts of any scenario, in that the player characters wake up and they have been thrown into some caves and expected to die. they do not have their equipment, they don't have their spell books, they do not have their armour or weapons. They are expected to survive otherwise, and it's really a case of finding their way out and finding some allies, exploring the dungeon, and then getting out to face the slave lords, recovering their equipment. And here, your classic scenes you'll encounter, giant ants lairs, fungal chambers, sort of like the kind of walking mushroom encounters, like a mushroom garden there. And you've got more illustrations in here than you have in the previous scenarios. But, here we go, and you can actually become allies with the mushroom men, enter into a commune with them in the fungus forest and the lair. And there's a chasm and even a bat cave there. And ultimately, player characters will actually manage to escape, get out onto the islands, and they'll actually encounter some actually quite fearsome creatures on the island, which infamously sits basically in a lake in the caldera of a volcano, which you think it's fine, but the end of the scenario is things go disastrously wrong. The volcano erupts unexpectedly, and there's a big basically exodus of people trying to escape and fight and so on, and that includes getting to the water dragon, which is where the slave lords appear, and here you have the sort of infamous full illustration of them. It really hasn't appeared elsewhere in the book, and this is where the player characters have a showdown against them, and hopefully put an end to their menace. There we go. There's the pseudohelm up in flames, and then you've got new monsters, cave fisher. So the caves themselves are like, do you have that sort of naturalism you expect of a Dungeons and Dragons cave system? There's very little sort of like artificiality of a dungeon to it. You've got magma men, myconoid or fungus men, stats. And then we have Soundling, and then the tournament characters again. Tournament scoring. The format for dungeons are slave lords, very quite dispersed, and a lot of corridors are moving around. So they're not really dungeons, they're just the caves as such. Tactical considerations. There's a map of the island. And you've got at the centre there the erupting volcano, and that adds essentially a real sense of a real dynamic situation at the end. The docks and the water dragon, which is this ship that hopefully, or boat that the player character will attempt to escape on. Lovely addition here at the end, we have fan illustrations of various NPCs and so on that were met throughout the campaign. And the monsters. This is a nice addition. I forgot this was in here. So I'll just show you more of this because, hey, that's what you really want to look at. So there we go. Just more. Originally, sort of like, if I remember rightly, this when it was collected, it would have like a booklet of illustrations as well. I think helpful. It may have done. I can't remember exactly. I have to go and check. But it's been a while since I've looked at the original because I had this, and this was more interesting in many ways because it was different. It had all this artwork and then A0 at the back, at the front. So more of this artwork. Actually, quite a lot of this artwork, and you could really use this if you were running this campaign. There's nothing to stop you sort of, using this as illustrations and so on to help bring the campaign itself alive. So yeah, that is against the slave lords, or A0 to A4 rather than A1 to A4, as was published in the 80s. So yeah, this, I mean, obviously today you can easily get copies of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Grab this, play through this campaign if you wanted to. Of course, you can find a retro clone that does Advanced Dungeons and Dragons kind of style play with its astonishing tales of men and women of Hyperborea, or Advanced Labyrinth Lord, or even, if you will, sort of like the advanced fantasy rules for Old School Essentials, which I think possibly might be a bit too, might not have quite the detail and tactical considerations of which you might need for this, as much as it's a really good retro clone. But then again, you can easily adapt this to the retro clone, or role-playing game of your choice, in part because much of the stats and the language is very much the same, and you can find a write-up for one orc or a goblin in one game or another and easily adapt it. So yeah, 10 years old, against the Slave Lords, published by Wizards of the Coast in 2013. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook. If you have, please do click on the like button down below. And of course, if you've got any comments, I appreciate you taking the time to post those. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to yet more unboxings in the Nook, where you will see me out here with a box containing a book or game, which I'll unbox and chat about to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea. Then please do hit the subscribe button down below. Thanks again for watching another unboxing in the Nook. We'll be back again soon with another one. Bye for now.